What is up with churches and money? Churches that focus on money, it's usually one of two things. Either it is a prosperity gospel millionaire pastor who's asking poor people to give him more of their money, or it's sadder. It's a church that has absolutely failed to do its job, to make disciples and be relevant to its community, and they're begging for money just to stay afloat. There's got to be a better way. What should you expect a church to do with the money you give them? More importantly, what should you expect God to do with the money you give to that church? That's what we're talking about this week.
Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching.
Hello all, welcome once again to the pre-recorded live show from Kindred UMC. My name is Chris Hayden. I am the pastor of Kindred UMC.
I'm Taylor and I'm not.
I'm Jim and I'm not. Am I supposed to say that?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or did I?
It is.
Did
It's
I
a bit
jump
of a
the gun?
gimmick. We like to surprise whoever's new with a. And now, tell us something about yourself.
Okay.
Jim is another UMC pastor. You're an ordained elder, I believe. Correct? Yes. An ordained elder. And I won't bore you with all the details of what that means. He's a pastor, and I'm a pastor. We're pastors.
Again, I'm not.
Yeah, again.
Not yet.
I cannot emphasize enough.
That I am not.
No, but Taylor is an exploring candidate, and so this is an extra holy edition of the Kindred UMC live show.
Yep.
Super holy.
Sure is.
Very extra holy. We just concluded Barbies in the Bible, where we talked about my assertion that feminist doctrine and beliefs are actually inherent in Scripture, not misogynistic. So please go check that out if you're curious about what that means. And now we're entering into the season of Thanksgiving, a season of gratitude, and typically with the church, that's when we start to talk about monies. And I do want to have an honest conversation about church and money. And you will have already seen, if you're watching the video, an intro, but you guys will not have seen it. And essentially the intro says something along the lines of like, churches are kind of notoriously bad at money. Yeah. There's like two different categories of churches who talk actively about money. Mm-hmm. One is the prosperity gospel megachurch where there's a millionaire preacher who's asking poor people for more money. Mm-hmm. And then the other is like a desperate, dying church that can't fix their roof and can't replace the air conditioners, and they're begging you to please give money. Yeah. And those are kind of the two categories that I've experienced. And so for me, as I was kind of preparing for this, it begs the question, So what if we're asking people for money, what should people expect from the church and from God if we're giving money away? Like, what should people expect the church to do, and what should people expect God to do with the resources we're donating? So that's kind of the initiation, the context for the conversation. And I want to talk about a story that probably many people have at least heard about, and especially if you've grown up in the church, the feeding of the 5,000. But before we get into the text, I would just want to ask people who have been around the church, especially somebody who's another ordained person, what's been your experience with church and money? And that's kind of a broad question, and it's intentionally broad to kind of allow you to say whatever you want to say about it. What's been your experience with churches and money? What kind of like gut reaction do you have?
I basically was told that if I didn't tithe, I'd never have anything ever in my life.
Say more about that.
You're not gonna receive if you don't give.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when I became an adult and started making money, I don't make enough money to survive now. That's different. But I wasn't making enough money for sure back then. And they were like, you have to give 10% of your paycheck or 25% of your paycheck or whatever it is.
25%?
Yeah. Like, I went to a non-denominational church.
Right.
They were taking all the money for everything they could do. But the Presbyterian church was 10%.
I saw a meme on Reddit. I scroll through Reddit when I'm on the toilet. That's just the way it goes.
Good.
It helps me concentrate on the task at hand. But so I saw a meme that it said something along the lines of like, people are making more money than they've ever made, and yet people are broker than they've ever been.
I can attest to that fact.
And I think there is something that's a challenging context to start to talk about tithing and giving and being generous.
Because it was like, I had nothing to give, but I was being told that if I didn't give what I had, which at the time was like, maybe I had an extra $10 out of a paycheck.
Yeah.
So it's like, what am I going to do with it? Like, this $10 could be like anything, but it was like, no, you have to give what you have or you're never going to get anything in return. So it was very that.
What's interesting, Taylor, is my experience growing up was actually the exact opposite.
Must be nice.
Where but it was weird. No, it was actually really harmful, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Because the church that I grew up in never talked about finances, at least like publicly, you know? Yeah. And so I grew up in this church, and I grew up not understanding how a church functions off of what people give, you know? And so there was this complete misunderstanding on my part in terms of how those monies are used, you know?
Kind of like taxes, like you don't know where it's going. So
yeah,
it's
no,
just
exactly. I had no clue. And all I knew was this is a thing that they do in service.
Yeah.
Just like taxes, like you don't.
It's not like I'm going to send money to that mission or I'm going to send money to get a new roof. It's like, we're going to trust that you're going to make a good decision with this money. And in my experience, the pastors aren't the best people to trust with the money.
Yeah, well, okay. So
in my experience, sorry guys.
I understand.
Not you two. Y'all are great.
How do you know?
I don't. That's fair.
Did you see the car I drew? No.
So for clarity's sake, let me just say, Kindred UMC is we sold a piece of property, and through a special vote of the bigger general annual conference, the Florida annual conference, we mostly sustain ourselves off of the interest from an investment. So every dollar that we collect, and this is not something that churches get to do, typically speaking, every dollar that we collect goes specifically to a charity that we have been choosing kind of every season.
See, that's good to know.
Yeah, so we are able to fund ourselves salary and equipment and any fees that we have to pay for different things. We're able to fund ourselves off of interest alone, and so every dollar that we collect goes to a specific charity. And this, in fact, we're kind of launching right now. We just recently committed to a group called Zoe Empowers, which they're active all over the globe in impoverished communities in third and second world countries, and we are partnering with two other churches to sponsor a community. And what they do is they take impoverished children essentially, and they teach them like entrepreneurial life skills, and they teach them how to like build a business and make an income and make a way. And then they send them back to their home communities to create to create job opportunities and resource. Like it's a really, really effective. They have an incredibly effective. So links will be in the description below. Every dollar that you give to us for the next 3 years, we've committed to this community. We've ponied up $4,500 a year, which we're counting on you to do. So our bills are covered, but that's going to come from you. So please do that. But I'm a little ahead of myself. So let's actually, I prefer to start with the text, and we've gotten a little far. So let's go to the text. Let's talk about Jesus feeding the 5,000, and we will, and then we'll take it from there. So the first thing I need to say about this story is it's the only miracle story that's found in all four Gospels. None of the other miracle stories are found in all four Gospels, and there are some slight discrepancies. So all the biblical literasts out there can explain to me, did the fish come from the disciples or did the fish come from the little boy? You tell me, because John disagrees with you or all the other Gospels disagree with you. That's the way it goes. But we are reading from Mark chapter 6, verses 30 through 44. Actually, I'm going to start at 31. And this is after the disciples have been sent out to heal the sick and cast out demons. And they've just returned. So they were followers, disciples. And then Jesus is like, all right, now it's time for you to go put this into practice. And they go out and start doing the stuff that Jesus has been teaching them to do. And then they come back and they like report back to him. And so we're going to hear the difference of disciples and apostles. Apostles means sent. Disciples means learner or follower. And so that's going to be important context. So here we go. Chapter 6, verse 31. He, being Jesus, he said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away on a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them." So essentially, they get back from their being sent, and Jesus is like, "Hey man, let's go debrief in a quiet place where we're away from the crowds," but they're too popular, and all the crowds are like, "We're going to go wherever you are," and they beat them there. So Jesus is trying to retreat away in solitude, and all the crowds kind of follow him there. Verse 30. What? He's got groupies. Yes, he has groupies. That's exactly it. Verse 34. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." So it's dinner time, and we're in the desert. Like, why don't we dismiss these crowd so we can have dinner? But he answered them, and I think this is the key phrase to understanding this passage. So, "Hey man, everyone's hungry, send them away." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread?" Denari's money, by the way. "Are we supposed to go in and buy like $200 worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to go to all the people and sit them down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and of 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, and listen to this language, because I'm going to ask you about it. He looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples. Blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to disciples to set before the people, and he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces of fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. So, first of all, initial observations, questions, comments, concerns. Have you any?
I hear 5,000 men, but you know that there were women and kids there too, right?
So
I feel like they're not even counted.
That's
in the
literally
whole
in the
count.
other Gospels.
Shocker.
They exactly say they make a point of saying 5,000 men, and that's not even counting. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're
like
talking
even
about
more.
thousands and thousands.
Look at how far we've come.
Yeah. Look at right. And it should be noted that Mark was the first gospel that was like written down. It was about 40 or so years after the death of Christ, and it's the earliest gospel that was like put to paper. So that's why I chose Mark, even though it's in all 4 gospels. I just chose the first primary source. Yeah. What do you make of the blessed gave broken? What do you make of that language? Does that remind you of anything? That is a loaded. I try not to ask loaded questions, but that's a very.
That's very
question.
like, what do they communion? Very, very communion of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very communion of you.
Very communion of you. It's very communion of Jesus to do that. Yeah. So one of the things that's important to remember is that this was written decades after. So the church already exists. It exists in a home church kind of form, but their main form of worship was gathering in homes, sharing like a letter or a piece of scripture, like they would read from the Torah or read a letter that literally Paul had written, and then they would share communion. And so any first century Jew who's reading this, who's a follower of Christ, would read this and go like, that's what we do every week.
Right.
That like, so there's something that Mark is doing on purpose here. That's kind of like, it's an allusion to communion. It's an allusion to the Eucharist. He wants the readers to be like, I know what that is. We do that every week. You know?
Like it like brings you back a little bit because like you're kind of getting lost a little bit with like what all is going on, and then it's like, oh wait, I know what that is. So it's kind of like a circle back.
Certainly that, but also like the Eucharist is not just a meal,
right?
You know?
Yeah, it becomes like a sacred act that there's something highly exalted about what he's getting ready to do, right?
Yeah.
And so this means way more than just, oh, you're hungry, here's some food.
Yeah, there's like a
cool.
special holy presence in this act, and that's what Mark I think is getting at. Mark's trying to say like, no, there's something going on here. There's something going on here. So what do you make of? There's 5 bread and 2 fish. All right, sit them down and feed them.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Yeah.
Because this, I think, is
That's
something.
why you're here.
This is what we're doing. I'm walking you through.
Just let me know when we start.
You go right
and
ahead.
then and then we'll no. 5 and 2, right? Like we can get all into the numerology of all of that and everything, but here's
Hebrew religion loves the numerology
right.
for sure.
But to me, the word that comes out of that is scarcity, right? And that's all we have, right? I mean, that's basically what the disciples are asking. Like, how are we supposed to do this with this? And I feel like going back to your original question, that's something that you hear emerge out of the church, and maybe not the leadership, but the people within the church of how can we do X or how can we do Y or how can we do Z? We don't have enough to do this. And so the 5 and the 2 to me is like, if you could put it in bold and caps and highlight it and be like, look, this is all we have. You know, it's like a big highlighting of just how quote unquote little from the disciples' perspective they have to work with, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think Mark is making a point here about what is possible versus what we think is impossible.
Yeah.
Like there's something going on with, you're not measuring it right. Like I go back and forth. Like, I'm not so sure that this was a miracle as much as it was like, bring what you have. And what happens when everyone brings what they have? When everyone brings what little they have,
You get a bunch.
the end of the story is abundance.
Yeah.
The end of the story is we've got more than we started with. When everyone brings what they have, we have more than what we started with. The other point. All right. There's 2 more things. And I'm going to forget them because that's how my stupid.
Say them like a
works.
list, and we'll bring it back.
So, all right. The 2 things are I'm going to talk about Moses, and then the other thing too is I want to talk about you feed them.
Okay.
I'm going to forget that you feed them when I start talking
got
about
it.
Moses. All right.
my
Okay.
head.
So the other allusion that's being made here is the Exodus story. So there's bread and there's fish. And in the Exodus story, Moses leads the Israelite people out of Egypt to the promised land. They fail and they get sent into the wilderness. And the wilderness, what do they eat? They eat manna, which is bread, daily bread, and they eat flesh of the sea.
Which would be fish.
It's bread and fish. And there's a theme throughout all the book of Mark where Mark is constantly comparing Jesus to Moses. And so that combined with the Eucharist language, there's a statement that Mark's making about this Christ guy. This Jesus fella it's kind of a Christianese phrase, but like one who is greater than Moses.
Yeah.
You know, Mark is making a statement about this Jesus guy, and he's saying directly comparing him to Moses, and he's directly comparing this group of people to the Israelites who were in the wilderness, sheep without a shepherd, you know, out into a deserted place, bread and fish. Like there's something about this where Mark is trying to insist upon Jesus's Christ-like nature here. What was the other thing I said I was going to talk about?
You feed them.
Yeah. Okay. So this is.
Can I say something real quick about that? What you just said, though.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is most fascinating about this story. So you got the disciples; they're wrestling with this, right? And they're like, "Wait, you were asking us to do this? Like, you know, we don't have enough or whatever." They're asking all these questions that
What
are
are we
really
to do? Spend hundreds of dollars and feed these people.
right, and it's all rooted in doubt, basically, and not doubt like, you know, it's just like fear and like, you know, how will this be?
Very much like the Israelites.
But do you notice in the story, the people that are receiving it, that are in need, never question.
Oh my
You know what I
gosh.
mean? Like they never raise a question. They're like, bring it.
Like,
You know?
thanks for the bread.
Yeah. And so I think the people in need know who Jesus is before the disciples do.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yes. So a lot of the Barbies in the Bible stuff that we just did, this is a running theme. Also, the disciples kind of missed the point. So
That's fair.
we just finalized Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was the apostle to the apostles. She's the first person
That, like,
to understand the resurrection.
I love that.
And the disciples are like,
That was a good
What?
like, what happened? And she's like, it's real. Like, she's the
Right.
one who insists on the reality of what Jesus prophesied. Like, he said overtly that he was going to die and resurrect. And there's something here too. Like, the disciples are like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
And the people are like, he can do it.
Right. It's almost like
He's got it.
yeah, it's almost like they're connecting the dots
Yeah.
before the disciples do.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's the crazy. That was, find the thumbnail. That was shook.
Okay. Is this more hipster, cool people language? Because
I'm not connecting the dots. I don't know.
I don't know shook. Is this Kiki again?
No, this is not Kiki again. That's funny though. Shook is just like, wow.
Okay,
Like,
great.
Like that was just wild.
I understand wow.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
a word I
Yeah.
recognize.
Forwards and backwards.
Okay, so all right. So the last thing I want to point out and talk about is
You feed them.
you feed them. So they had just been sent out to cast out demons and heal the sick. And they come back and they're like, what do we do about all these people? And Jesus is like, you feed them. Like he doesn't say, I'm going to feed them. He says, you feed them.
It's almost like he was like, you can do it. And I know you can do it. Like, I believe in you. Like, go do your thing.
Yeah. And they do.
Yeah.
They do. So, like, to combine the 2 points, they don't believe in it, and yet they do. They do accomplish the miracle.
Yeah.
Like, the whole idea of that, like, Jesus does this miracle. No, he doesn't.
His
No,
disciples
he
did.
doesn't. He says, you feed them. And they're like, well, all we got's 5 bread and 2 fish. And he's like, yeah, okay, we'll sit them down and feed them. And they do, and it works. And then they have a bunch left over.
Yeah.
So
Do you have it still open? I don't know if you have it. Do you have the Bibles? Oh, shoot.
I've got it
Just, I'm
bookmarked.
curious. Okay, like I'm just curious. Like, where does the food come from again?
it's from the. It's kind of
Like,
from
where
the
do they
disciples.
gather
It's not
it? Is it
entirely
theirs
clear.
or is it?
So John, the Gospel of John says that. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the beeping, but that's my sous vide machine. The Gospel of John says that it comes from a little boy.
yeah, which I love.
The
right?
other-
That's the story I remember.
Yeah, the other 3
it's so
Gospels
cool.
don't say.
So it doesn't say
they
where
just
it
say
comes
like,
from,
go see
right?
what you have.
I got
Like
you.
The
that's-
story I remember growing up was the little boy.
Yeah, that's the Gospel of John.
Yeah, that's
and
the one
the
I
Gospel of John is the latest. It's the later one. And anyway,
Yeah.
I don't have time to get all back into the literalism of things.
That was wild. The people receiving were the ones that didn't have doubts.
Yeah, right.
That was wild.
Yeah, they were the ones who were, and I think because they're hungry.
Yeah.
When you're
Yes.
hungry, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, and there's something about that. So we could go on and on and on. We are out of time. But the thing I want to lift up is, you as a follower of Jesus should care, one, what the church is doing with your money. You should care about that.
You should care what anybody's doing with your money, actually.
Yeah. Broadly speaking,
Just to throw it out there.
And it's worth asking the question. I've only got 5 bread and 2 fish. I'm struggling to pay my bills. I can only afford like $10 a month, man.
Maybe.
And so it's worth asking the question, what can God do with 5 bread and 2 fish?
Yeah.
What can God do with $5 a month? What can God do with your chump change? Because I think there's too many tithing sermons that are like, you need to be working towards the tithe. And that's certainly a worthy goal, and we can talk about the merits of that. But let's talk about reality here. Let's talk about probably the people who are watching this right now, who are people who have been hurt and abused and like have been betrayed by the church. Mm-hmm. Like that's mostly who we deal with. So if you're one of those people, I imagine you're probably reluctant to trust us with your money, especially if you can only afford $5 a month or whatever. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing I want to say. Every dollar you give to Kindred UMC for the foreseeable future, we've made a 3-year commitment, is going to a community of people who have not. People who are starving, people who don't have education, people who are struggling to just make ends meet in another part of the world. And every dollar you give to us, because we're funded. You don't have to worry about paying our like. There's a reason you can see my fanny pack. All right, we're recording in my living room. Like
hey, this is Studio A.
Yeah, this is Studio A, Kindred Studio A, aka my front room. Okay, so like every dollar that you give is going to go to a group of people who are, and it's twofold. It's 2 groups of people. One group of people is the people in need that I talked about. The second group of people that it's going to are people who are experts in training those people to have their own like entrepreneurial business, to earn a living and to train other people to. It's a disciple method. It's a model that replicates itself. We are training people in the impoverished world to train other people to be able to sustain themselves. That's what we're doing, and we're committed to it for the next 3 years. So every dollar that you give to us is going directly to that cause, and you will hear from us updates and personal stories. We will actually get to know this community, and we will understand what they're struggling with, what they're succeeding at, who's winning, who's having a hard time. We will have opportunities to get to know them. They will have opportunities to get to know us. We are officially invested in this community that we're going to be supporting for the next 3 years and hopefully beyond. So there's a QR code at the end. There's a link down in the description below. Every dollar you give will go to that. So please, whatever you have, if it's 5 loaves and 2 fish, God can do amazing and miraculous things when we all get together and offer what we have to spare to each other. And we can save the lives of an entire community. So please give and give generously, and really ask yourself, like, what do you have and what do you need? And ask yourselves, what do they have and what do they need? And consider giving and tithing. And any final thoughts before we close?
I heard that Chris is a really great cook, but just be careful, because when he invites you to dinner, you end up doing this. And,
I will trick you into.
And then sometimes you get invited to this and not dinner.
Oh, really?
You know
Are you
what I mean?
serious?
So, like,
that's crazy. That's not a good deal. No,
I'll share my
this
steak with
is
you.
awesome.
When we all bring
what we have in abundance.
I don't have everything, but I have enough.
That's okay. I have tacos waiting at home. I'm totally good.
That's awesome.
All right. So, in conclusion, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Hey, woman. I'm still keeping it.
You're still
I'm still keeping it.